I guess we got to talk about this patch, huh? I guess we need more slop for more Brian F. All right, let's talk about the patch. Let's get into it. Let's set up some context as well. There was just recently a balance patch for Street Fighter 6. But before we actually talk about the patch, I feel like it's really useful to take a moment to step back and look at the patch history for this game. So on the Street Fighter Buckler website, you can actually get the full list of changes. And the way the patches were structured as we got used to over the past 2.5 years, you can see that there's all these minor updates, which generally feature very sparse balance updates and are usually bug fixes. Then you have the year-month version, the 2024-05 version update here. This was officially what the community would call the mark of Season 2. And this balance patch here had changes for all the release characters at the time and had universal changes and had an overall concept from the devs here. And in practice, or the actual effects of this patch, were the initial nerfs to parry, where parry had a wider hurt box, and perfect parry now introduced scaling to the drive gauge damage on the follow-up combos as well. And they also made a few other universal changes, but the parry one was definitely the big one. And then significant balance updates to the majority of the cast, like individual unique character changes. Since that moment, you know, there was no big patches until come December, 7 months later, we had the December 2nd patch in 2024. And this patch was actually very big. I thought this was supposed to be a minor patch, but we actually had a lot of significant changes to the individual characters. The universal changes were like not that big of a deal from this patch, but this patch did a lot of things like reverting changes to nerfs to JP. It also added a lot of buffs to characters like Terry, and Ryu got a lot of decent buffs during this time as well. Dawson got his safe on block super. There was a lot of interesting changes during this balance patch, which kind of caught me by surprise, which is starting to set the tone for the pacing for the patches. In Street Fighter V, it was very common for you to have an initial season-defining patch introducing the new season, then have a mid-season patch which kind of fine-tuned things and was also pretty substantial. And so it seemed like Street Fighter VI was following the same pattern. Now come 2025-06 version. This is right when Street Fighter 6 Years 1 and 2 Edition is releasing on the Switch. This is the big patch, which had more universal mechanic changes, which were things like the throws now granting meter to whoever teched the throw, which was a crazy change in hindsight. I don't know why they did that. And also introduced the changes to perfect parry, where you had to then perfect parry high and low explicitly. If you perfect parried a low attack mid, it would give you an imperfect parry and not cause the screen freeze and frame advantage. And also a decent amount of character specific changes as well. Overall, people thought it was kind of not that crazy. Like the changes to the characters weren't that crazy. The big ones were like Ryu getting buffed like Omega crazy after the already substantial buffs in the previous patch, and Mai not getting nerfed at all really. And so it was kind of seen, I think, as a very underwhelming patch. Maybe Ken was the most impacted from this patch. He got nerfed pretty heavily in hindsight, I would say, with his changes to Jinrai and his throw loop pressure. But overall, I think people thought that these system changes were not impactful. In fact, giving the defender more meter when teching a throw, which was supposed to be enabling or helping the throw loop situation, ended up just causing more chaos. And sometimes it would give the offensive player meter when they delay teched, and ended up with a lot more usage of super throughout the rounds, and ended up with more level 3s. It made the game more volatile, I feel. And I don't know, people were at the time were also saying crazy things like, guys, why do you keep calling this the Season 3 balance patch? This is not Season 3. I went back also and double checked the release dates on these patches before going live here and checking the Reddit comments, and those comments were everywhere. I got those comments on my YouTube channel. I got those comments on Twitter. I got those comments on Twitch. I don't know what copium people were huffing at the time. It was so strange to me to say, for people saying, this is not the big balance patch. Don't worry, the big balance patch is coming. That's not how it operates. When they do this, the year, month, ver, that means it's the big balance patch. That is like the updated version of the game. Very strange that I saw all those comments. I don't know where that was coming from. It was just not following the pattern at all. And anyways, it was true that this was the big update. There was very little to no changes from here going forward until December. Now remember, last December, we had maybe arguably a bigger balance patch, at least to the individual characters, not the system mechanics, than the initial Season 2, the 2024-05 version patch. This had a ton of changes. I was so caught off guard by how impactful this patch was. And at this time, a lot of people are starting to get a little unruly with how Mai and the West is running the game. And it turns out there's another demon perceived over in Japan for running the game over there. And, you know, people are definitely hankering for a balance patch. Ryu is running amok, spamming Hashogeki and Donkey Kick like crazy. People definitely wanted some changes to the top tiers of the cast. For sure, that was a common sentiment amongst a lot of the active player base. So, December 16th, finally a balance patch. What do they deliver? So, as you can see with the highlighted characters, it's a far cry from the main version balance patch and the December 2nd balance patch of last year. We're following the same timelines. By this logic, December 16th, we should have a decent amount of characters changing. We got a handful. And it turns out that these are mostly bug fixes. The only characters that got actual balance changes are the DLC characters, Mai, Elena, and Sagat. Sea Viper got nothing as well. 3 characters got patched. And Mai, while it looks like she has a page of nerfs here, it's actually just one nerf, and these are all one nerf, and there's a separate nerf to the throw. She got her throw loop nerfed so that if you dash in, you're actually closer after the throw, meaning she cannot walk back to shimmy because she'll get thrown in return. No change to the frame advantage. It's still a true throw loop. It's still really strong. But, you know, you can maybe threaten between wake up invincible reversal and wake up quick tech, and she can't bait both options if she dashes in. So it is a nerf, for sure. It does have an impact to the strength of the throw loop, but it's still a really strong throw loop. The rest of this is nerfs to how much drive gauge is recovered by the opponent when they parry. So actually you recover more drive gauge when you parry the fans, and that means you won't be burnt out as much by the fans. I think these changes are impactful. Don't get me wrong. I think these changes do make it a little bit less likely that you're going to get burnt out by Mai, and sometimes you can risk a reversal or a quick tech on a throw loop. This will change the outcome of matches here and there, for sure. But the OD fan is still there, her neutral is still there, her level 1 is still there. Like, she's still the same character, for sure. This is not a massive adjustment into her perceived strength, and it's not a massive adjustment into the experience fighting the character. But it does matter. I don't want to downplay that. I do think the drive gauge pairing, like you just regular parry a fireball and you get drive gauge back, your drive gauge positive, is pretty big, because sometimes you just get burned out mid-screen and die. Elena got a few nice adjustments for her buffs, which I think were needed. Her Leopard Snap leaves her closer, so she can get 2 lights on block instead of 1 while the opponent walks away, so it's harder to walk out of her pressure. And she now builds meter after doing her level 1. If she combos after her level 1 anti-air super, she builds meter. Kind of nice. And then Sagat, he got buffed like crazy. Now his Tiger Nexus connects from his lights really easily, allowing him to do light confirms into Tiger Nexus. And also his lights have decreased... there's decreased pushback all over the place, and his crouching light kick has pushback on hit and block reduced, improving his light pressure and confirms, and also the combos there. And crouching medium kick has more frame advantage, and that means he's going to get way better drivers combos from crouching medium kick. His previous issue was his low game was not that good. Normally, after a low confirm, when people are trying to walk away from his Tiger Nexus pressure, you'd only get like a crouching light kick stand jab into DP, which is a worse knockdown situation that he can get from other combos. Now, the crouching light kick to stand jab will combo into a Tiger Nexus again, and you can go into a Tiger Nexus reset for pressure or an overhead, and then go for a strike throw shimmy immediately, or go low again. So you can kind of get looped like a Jin Rice situation like Ken by Sagat now, because of his low buffs and also the reduced pushback on the Nexus. They're kind of flatlining his weakness. You're in a little bit of a mid-screen vortex with the Tiger Nexus now. They're making that a lot more powerful, which feels a little bit dated, because I do think the perception of Sagat's strength was that he was decent, not busted, he was decent on release. Some people were downplaying him. I thought he felt pretty good, and I think that impression of him has climbed with time, which is pretty typical for a Street Fighter 6 character. Most characters seem pretty good on release, and then usually they improve a little bit. Sometimes they flatline, but usually they just improve with time. All the DLC has been pretty strong. I think Terry was one of the standouts where he was pretty weak, and maybe Elena. Terry got buffed a lot. Terry was pretty weak on release, and I think his buffs actually were important. Sagat, I think, is pretty good on release, and then he got buffed, after people figured out that he was actually pretty good. So this feels like a delayed reaction from Sagat. But of course, the reaction to the community here is, what the hell? There's hardly a patch here, and people are upset. Now, I will say, I do think there's mixed reactions. There's a class of the community who's saying, like, why does it matter? Why are you modern gamers so desperate for novelty? The balance is in a decent spot. Why should they just make up balance changes for content? And that does invite a pretty interesting philosophical question that I've talked about many times, like, what is the goal of a balance update? Is the goal of a balance update actually to make the game more balanced, or is the goal of a balance update to make brand new playing experiences and new novelty for the player base? Or is it somewhere in between? Like, what of that spectrum, this pie in the sky idea of perfect balance, this theoretical perfect balance versus just novelty? Like, I think the answer lies somewhere in the middle. Usually it depends on the goal of the developers and what the goal, or what should the developers actually be aiming for, what the community is asking for. I think it depends. I think in the past, a lot of the balance changes for Street Fighter V, for example, were definitely more along the content novelty line of things. Street Fighter V balance patches would just make shit up just to give you something new to play with. So yeah, I think now with Street Fighter 6, they're definitely just aiming more for balance. At the same time, I don't think the balance changes are that impactful, so I don't think they're rapidly approaching any like pie in the sky perfect balance nirvana that they might be aiming for. I think they're moving at a snail's pace to get there. I've seen both mixed reactions. There's people who are like, it doesn't matter, who cares, the game is good, the game is fine, keep playing. And there's other people who are saying like, oh, I'm bored of the game, Mai's running amok, I would like something new to play with, or like better balance. I play a character like Manon, or I play like, I don't know, Lily. Give me something new to keep up with the top tiers. It depends, right? There's mixed reactions. And a big part of the people who would push back against people complaining about the lack of content and updates from Capcom on this front would often cite Japan. The Japan community is growing like crazy. They're increasing the player output and turnout to major events by orders of magnitude, right? It's an absolute explosion in Japan, and not just from the quality of the game itself. The game did release in a great state, great product, but also the community efforts to bring people in. It became like a trend starting in season 2 for the players in Japan to pick up the game due to community-driven events, VTubers, all that stuff. You've heard the story by now, right? But it seems like there's finally hit a breaking point where notable figures in Japan and average members of the community are speaking out against the lack of perceived balance changes from Capcom. The biggest, most notable voice, of course, is Shuto here, who tweeted out, "That said, even though the official statement was that they'd stop the once-a-year adjustments, this frequency of adjustments honestly leaves me a bit dissatisfied." He's referring to Capcom actually making a statement saying that going forward, we'd like to put out more frequent, smaller updates instead of just once-a-year adjustments. After they made that announcement, they followed the same pattern as they did in the past with one major update, then 6-7 months later, another update. Oh, did I do the thing? I said 6-7. Listen, we're gonna have to roll with it. Someone's gonna timestamp this in the clips channel, in the more Brian F channel. It's over. I'm sorry. So they've delivered the same number of patches with less changes, which is very strange. So they've done that. On top of this, Shuto continues, "Personally, I love it if they did fine-tuning for each act. I do get the sense that they're paying attention to the pro scene, and I'm really grateful for that. But I have the impression that many people felt this was a year that brought a sense of boredom, including for casual players. Personally, I'm looking forward to the new system coming next year." And I think this is a translation debuff here. I think he's trying to say, I'm looking forward to potentially having a new system to play with. That's something that Shuto would like to see. And High Fight highlights this here. Japanese Street Fighter Twitter right now on fire. So it wasn't just Shuto. I did go through some random tweets, people quote tweeting Shuto. Turns out it's not perfect utopia in the Japan Street Fighter 6 community. Some people are really, really annoyed with the lack of content and updates to Street Fighter 6, and it was so strange for so long. I feel like I would see this pushback whenever I touched on these topics, where people would say like, "Oh, why are you complaining? Just look at Japan." Like, no community is a monolith. And at certain point, there's expectations that happen with live service games that you want new content. I mean, we also don't have new costumes coming out at an acceptable rate, I would argue. And at this point, I think they finally hit a tipping point with the balance changes where they felt like this was insufficient. And the funny thing is, they're not complaining about Mai. In fact, a large consensus is that Mai got unjustly nerfed. The actual problem character for Japan is Ed. They saw that Ed was great out here and started losing their minds, because it kind of makes sense. If you look at Street Fighter League, you look at their World Warriors, the most consistent representative in their tournaments is Ed. Sahara is like running the show now with their World Warrior events. In Street Fighter League on teams, they have multiple Ed players. So in Japan, it's Ed. In the West, it's Mai. And it's pretty interesting to see the difference in that. And I can understand the complaints about Ed. I think Ed will always fundamentally be a really strong character. He sort of avoids the interactions that other Street Fighter characters have to go through with his whole system and flicker and his long-range buttons. He outranges characters. And I think he has a level of safety to his gameplay that other characters aren't afforded at a fundamental level. So I can see why Japan would see that he's super strong and use him heavily. I don't mind Ed. I mean, he's not saturated as much in our tournaments and most tournaments in general that we see in the West, but he's really overrepresented in Japan Street Fighter League. But, you know, most people in America don't watch the Japan Street Fighter League because it airs when everyone's asleep and you're not really allowed to make content on it. And, you know, Capcom Japan is doing everything they can to make sure that people aren't exposed outside of Japan to Street Fighter League Japan. But he is running amok, Ed is, and running the show to a decent degree compared to other characters in Japan. So it's interesting to see that difference in reaction. It's so rare to see a top level Japanese player say anything remotely negative about a patch, about Capcom's direction. Very rare. Usually those kind of voices are saved for players of the status of like a Momochi or Daigo. You have to be untouchable to be able to voice concerns and to kind of spearhead these types of movements in the Japanese FGC. Shuto is, I believe, like maybe the largest Street Fighter 6 streamer in Japan right now. He's one of the biggest streamers right now in Japan. And I feel like this is kind of him also coming into his own in his status, in my opinion. I feel like he's kind of stepping up and speaking out. It's definitely a different sort of community and culture as well. So I think he's kind of filling that role that like a Momochi and Daigo would do, because Momochi and Daigo are definitely the two community leaders in Japan that you can see speaking out when they find issues with directions that the developers are taking or directions that certain elements of the scene are going in. You've seen that this could have consequences. Yeah, Dogura got fined or got reprimanded at least by the Capcops and his team when he made an offhand joke about not needing to practice for Street Fighter League. So you don't go without consequence when there's a league format like that, which actually employs these players. Sort of like in the NBA and NFL, you can get fined. You don't follow their media guidelines. It can lead to repercussions for your career. So it's very different than in the West. That's about it. I'm not sure if this will lead to anything. A lot of the community members in Japan were saying that they don't care if there's big tournaments coming up. A big speculation about the lack of changes is that Capcom Cup is around the corner, and by around the corner I mean months away. But Japan is still in the process of completing their World Warriors. The Street Fighter League Grand Finals still have not gone on. They finished the playoffs, but it's Crazy 8 versus Reject coming up for Grand Finals. So people are speculating that the developers are sensitive to the pro scene and don't want to shake things up too heavy. But if they didn't want to shake things up too heavy, they should have done these changes months ago. It's a very weird system right now, and we've already seen the confirmation from Nakayama-san about how the developers themselves and the people running the pro scene, the esports division of Capcom, aren't in sync. They didn't know about the Capcom Cup pay-per-view move, for example. We saw that the latest CPT season actually started before the Season 3 balance patch came out. We had two major CPT qualifying events before the 2025-06 patch came out. Combo Breaker and CEO are played on the old patch. So there's a lot of weird scheduling issues and a lot of disconnect between the developers, the esports division, and now finally the Japanese community as a whole. And there's a decent amount of discontent. Street Fighter 6 is still very popular, still very successful. I think it will live through this, of course, but I'm definitely interested to see if Capcom responds to this latest change. It feels like something in the air has changed a little bit, to be quite honest. So we'll see how that actually shapes up.